Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare.
Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram. Krishna Hare Ram Ram
Jai
Hare
Shri Krishna
Hare.
Chaitanya Prabhu
Krishna
Nityananda
Hare Ram
Shri
Ram
Advaita Radha Shri Shri
Krishna
Gaura
Hare
Bhakta Vrinda.
Krishna Krishna Hare Ram
Jai
Ram
Shri Krishna
Jai
Chaitanya
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Go Shri Radhe Golokananda Bhagwan ki
Bhagwan ki
jai.
jai.
Hare Krishna everyone.
So we're going to continue with verse number 34 today. And Yajendra, could you read the verse again?
Yes, 34.
34, yes.
34. And then we'll continue with the purport.
Te artham yat pratiyete na pratiyete chatmani tadvidhatmana mayam yatha bhaso yatha tama. O Brahma, whatever appears to be of any value, if it's without relation to me, has no reality. Know it as my illusory energy, that reflection which appears to be in darkness.
Hare Krishna. So last week we covered the first two paragraphs, and they were quite long. And to summarize very, very briefly, one of the main thrusts we were talking about is the difference between Yoga Maya, which is the spiritual energy of the Lord. That's Krishna's Swarup Shakti, the energy of the spiritual world in which everyone there is serving Krishna, and Mahamaya, which is the deluding energy of the material world where everyone is forgetting Krishna. Both Mayas are coming from Krishna. So that's a very, very general overview of that before we begin the third and fourth paragraphs, which we'll read. They're very short, but Rudrani and I decided we really want to just read these two paragraphs before we do the next one after that, because they have a very important point. So I'll read the third paragraph, and then Rudrani will read the fourth paragraph, and then we'll discuss before we go on. The Vedanta Sutra, in the very beginning, affirms that everything is born from the Supreme, and thus, as explained in the previous verse, all individual living entities are born from the energy of the Supreme Living Being, the personality of Godhead. Brahma himself was born from the energy of the Lord, and all other living entities are born from the energy of the Lord through the agency of Brahma. None of them has any existence without being dovetailed with the Supreme Lord.
The independence of the individual living entity is not real independence, but is just the reflection of the real independence existing in the Supreme Being, the Lord. The false claim of supreme independence by the conditioned souls is illusion, and this conclusion is admitted in this verse.
So the reason we're stopping now is because we'll remember these two paragraphs when we start the next one, because the next one builds on these. Question or a comment from anybody about these two paragraphs? So I have a question then. The question is this. Lord Brahma is said to be the creator of everything in the material world. But Lord Brahma gets all his energy from the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. So it would seem that Lord Brahma has independence because he's the most important person in the material world. But we were told here that he doesn't really have independence, neither do we. Why not? Why doesn't Lord Brahma have real independence?
Because he's also born from the energy of the Lord Sri Krishna.
Because his energy isn't really his. It's borrowed from Krishna. Anything else?
Also,
So,
after a certain, so even though Lord Brahma resides in the Brahmalok, still at some point in time, maybe after 15 trillion, I mean, there is a time life defined for even Lord Brahma, which is around 15 trillion years or something. But
It's actually 311 trillion years. That's how long he lived.
so I think that when there is energetic and the energy, so energetic is Krishna and Brahma could be considered as energetic. So he would not have any existence until he is connected, he's related to the energetic source. Otherwise, he will become meaningless.
Yeah, he has no energy except through Krishna.
Yes, so he will cut off. If it is independent, then he can be cut off and then he's finished.
Well, the verse says, whatever appears to be of any value, if it is without relation to me, has no reality. So
Is Lord Brahma is the post, is the one position.
it's a position, yes.
It's a position, yes. It changes, and you're getting onto something here. It changes. It's just a position. It's
Like Shiva's a position too.
well, kind of.
And Prabhuji, this is Shiva. What scientifically also it makes sense, right? Because there is no independent source of energy. The energy is always like, things comes animated only by getting a battery or getting a source of energy, right?
Exactly.
So the only and absolute source of energy is Krishna. So everything has to be having a trace of Krishna's energy.
Absolutely.
And these are all good points. I think Saki Priya was getting at something that was important. Brahmaji is only a post. Let's work on that. What does that mean?
Saki Priya.
What does it mean that it's only a post?
It changes according to its good deeds and bad deeds. Like if one of us, if we do that kind of austerity and pious deeds, then one can get there.
Yeah, you and I could actually become Brahma. We could.
We may have been.
We may have been Brahma.
Mhm.
It's possible. So there's a difference between Brahma and us and Krishna. What's the difference?
Quantity.
Well, that's not, yeah.
That's part of it.
That's part of it. Well,
we only
He's
have
a pure devotee of Krishna.
every living entity in this material world is subject to four things. What are they?
Yeah. Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi.
Yes, birth, death, old age, and disease. But Krishna? No. So real independence means that you're free from birth, death, old age, and disease, right?
Right.
If you're not free from birth, death, old age, and disease, what's your independence? You can be what? Independent to do what? I'm independent to fly to India, maybe. Or, someone's independent if they're rich enough, they can buy any kind of car they want. Well, what kind of independence is that? Brahma is so independent he can create planets, but he can't stop death. And he can't give liberation. So the only one who's independent is Krishna. And everybody else, as Prabhupada says, here's false claims. We're borrowing our energy from Krishna. Very important point. So now this is the next paragraph is very long, but keep in mind what we just were talking about, independence and the Lord and the living entities. So let's, Gajendraji, we can continue.
Rinaji?
Yes, Priya, hold on. Persons with a poor fund of knowledge become illusioned, and therefore the so-called scientists, physiologists, empiric philosophers, etc., become dazzled by the glaring reflection of the sun, moon, electricity, etc., and deny the existence of the Supreme Lord, putting forward theories and different speculations about the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of everything material.
Manish Bro?
The medical practitioner may deny the existence of the soul in the physiological bodily construction of an individual person, but he cannot give life to a dead body, even though all the mechanisms of the body exist even after death. The psychologists make a serious study of physiological condition of the brain, as if the construction of the cerebral lump were the machine of the functioning mind, but in the dead body of psychologists cannot bring back the function of the mind.
Savitaji?
These scientific studies of the cosmic manifestation or the bodily construction independent of the Supreme Lord are different reflective intellectual gymnastics only, but at the end they are all illusion and nothing more. All such advancement of science and knowledge in the present context of material civilization is but an action of the covering influence of the illusory energy.
Nishant?
That's Maya.
Mahamaya.
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 Me?
Yeah.
Is it me?
Yes, Nishant, yeah. Yes.
The illusory energy has two phases of existence, namely the covering influence and throwing influence. By the throwing influence, the illusory energy throws the living entities into the darkness of ignorance. And by the covering influence, she covers the eyes of men with a poor fund of knowledge about the existence of the Supreme Person who enlightened the Supreme Individual, living being, the Brahma.
Sonali?
The identity of Brahma with the Supreme Lord is never claimed herein, and therefore such a foolish claim by the man with the poor fund of knowledge is another display of the illusory energy of the Lord. The Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita 16.18-20 that demoniac persons who deny the existence of the Lord are thrown more and more into the darkness of ignorance. And thus such demoniac persons transmigrate life after life without any knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
There's a lot in this paragraph. Let's stop here because there's a lot in this paragraph. Does anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts about, I mean, there's a lot in here. Just name anything that grabs your attention. Okay.
Everything is illusion.
Yeah, and soul is the driving force in the one's body.
The soul is a driving force in one's body.
But it cannot be.
But but here we see what Gajendra has highlighted. That soul is the driving force, but the medical practitioner may deny the existence of the soul in the physiological body construction of an individual person, but he cannot give life to a dead body, even though all the mechanisms of the body exist after death.
Even after death.
Even after death. What is the difference between a live body and a dead body? That's the question right there.
The soul is gone and has taken another gross or shuttle body, depending on the karmas and depending on what is being remembered at the last minute.
Mm.
Yeah, the subtle body is gone.
The subtle body leaves along, the subtle body the soul leaves in the subtle body, but leaves the gross body behind. But Gajendra highlighted something interestingly. Someone may say they can't find the soul in the body. We say it's in the heart, but Prabhupada had a conversation with a heart surgeon who said, I can't find the soul in the heart. Why not? Supposed to be there.
It's very minute. It can't be seen with the contaminated senses.
Yeah, it's described. Who knows what it's described as? What size?
Consciousness.
10,000 something hair, tip of the hair.
Yeah.
Prabhu, I don't know the number exact.
And this is just for us to get an inkling of an idea, but obviously the soul is pure spirit.
Right.
And it cannot be perceived, even if we had the best microscope, it cannot be perceived because it's spirit, it's not matter. And another thing is that Prabhupada gives this example about the size of the soul just for us to have some kind of remote understanding of the tiny nature of the soul, but it's a spirit, it's not matter.
I think only the modern technology can measure the material things, since that consciousness, the soul, is nothing to do with the material. It is a spiritual nature, and there is no tool to measure a spiritual thing with a material tool, measuring tool. Very simple.
But you cannot
Yeah,
see
very
your
simple.
mind,
You can't
right?
see with your ears.
But you can't even see ego or mind, too.
Well, those are subtle and they can't be measured, but we can measure the mind in a way because we can see the behavior of a person, but they're very subtle also.
But it's matter.
But it's matter
It's
still.
matter,
It's
yeah.
still matter. I know it's interesting, and Prabhupada starts this paragraph by saying persons with a poor fund of knowledge become illusioned. And then he names people who should be people with a lot of knowledge. Scientists, physiologists, empiric philosophers, psychologists, they're people. And they want to put forth all sorts of speculations about the creation of everything. And my question is, why would these really smart people do that? They're so smart.
Yeah, because they believe what they see, it's
Because they think they are creator.
Yeah. They think nobody else is smarter than them.
They're very proud, but later in the purport, Prabhupada talks about something that happens to them and to all of us here. It says here, the illusory energy has two phases of existence.
Right. One is throwing and another one is covering. Those are the two words used here.
Yeah,
Yes.
throwing and covering. So they've been thrown, we've all been thrown, and we're all covered. Why did we get thrown?
Thrown from where?
From where did we get thrown from, and why did we get thrown?
maybe from Krishna to this land, this material, from spiritual world to the material world, just because we were envious of his opulence.
It's called, we turned away, Bahir Mukha. We turned away our face from the Lord or from the spiritual world.
Yep.
And then Maya, as soon as we turned, Maya gave us a swift kick.
Mm-hmm.
We got flying away. Thrown or kicked out. And that's once we're here, what's the other cover? What's the other potency is called the
Covering potency.
covering potency. That's Mahamaya. And we're covered that way. We're illusioned. So we come up with all these crazy theories about how the world's created. And it's all speculation meant to preserve. When a person does this kind of speculation, you know, about how the universe is created and all these things, and they don't include God, why do they do this? What's the reason?
Envy.
Envy.
Envy. Because that's the original reason why we get kicked out.
Mhm.
You know, all these bad qualities, lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, and envy. Envy comprises all of them. In other words, the lust, the anger, the greed, the madness, the illusion, the pride, they're all in envy. So when we have this propensity toward envy, all the other bad qualities are part of it also.
Does this mean that Prabhupada's against all science?
No. Atheism, not science. Prabhupada is against atheistic science. He's not against science at all, but he's against the science that proposes that the basis is matter, not understanding that the basis of the whole thing is spirit, and that there's a source, and that's the Supreme Lord. That's what Prabhupada is against, not about science. Science has multiple applications, can be very practical, and can be employed in the service of the Supreme Lord. Like, for example, right now, having a computer, all of us, we can discuss all these subjects, and that is because of science. So it has the practical application of something that considers that God is the source, the Supreme Lord is the source.
There's a good point there. All such material advancement of science and knowledge in the present context of material civilization is but an action of the covering influence of the illusory energy. As long as science is serving that atheistic point of view, then science is dangerous. But if science is used to better people's lives in one way or another, that's not a problem. Prabhupada was not against science, he was against scientism, is the church of science, so to speak. Any other questions or comments or thoughts?
Prabhuji, in one of the discussion, somebody was mentioning that the soul doesn't live in the heart, but around the covering of the heart, simply because when you do a heart transplant, the person doesn't change, you know. Yes. So by that logic, a soul is not in the heart, but around the heart, you know, somewhere.
And that term very, very broadly. It's not like he's sitting in the left ventricle.
Exactly.
You know, or he's in the pericardium. You'll find the soul. No, the soul is situated in that place, in that region. He also described this that the soul is the size of 9 inches, or the super soul is like 9 inches. Super soul is like 9. Well, you know, then you can say, well, how can you have a 9-inch super soul and an ant? So the point is that these are ways to understand the kind of influence that the soul and the super soul have within the body, because the body is animated by the soul. The soul's presence, you can tell by the consciousness.
Right.
And the super soul's consciousness.
If you see that, if you say that the soul is the source of energy, how can you actually measure the source of energy? Transcendental source of energy is impossible. So it's just a way of understanding that the soul is animating the body and making it up the body function.
Even with the heart transplant, like even the love for someone or the hatred for someone doesn't change, right? Even though heart is
What doesn't change?
even to the love for someone or hatred for someone, that doesn't change even if there is a heart transplant, right? I'm saying
Very good point, Prabhu.
the soul is the next layer.
Because the soul has nothing to do with matter.
Is it?
Yeah,
The soul has nothing to do with matter.
those are the feelings reside in our minds. That is different than
No, there's a difference in mind and intelligence, though, right?
Yes.
Yes, that's
Intelligence-
material.
But intelligence is in the mind, but the love is in the heart, right? That's what we say.
Well, I
Yeah.
didn't want to digress the conversation, but Mataji made it very clear that these are all symbolic, you know, and it should not be understood or taken verbatim, you know. Otherwise, you know,
Yeah, but I think
examples 9-inch and
yeah, but I think there's a point, right, in terms of, you know, like how when the heart stops beating, that's when a person you know, leaves this material body, right? So there are, and then also, like, if we look into more chakras and all that, right, in the physical body having those 6 chakras, there is a location, right? So there's a location behind every part where the chakras is and how it can go up. So I think there is a position, but it doesn't belong in the matter part of it. I think that's the distinction.
Well, it's interesting because, and we don't want to get too digressed here, but you know, sometimes the heart starts beating, but the person doesn't die. They have what's called a near-death experience. The heart starts beating again, and they've actually felt themselves leave the body and go to someplace else. Usually, we're not talking about very far. I mean, some people think they go to the spiritual world, but actually, they're going to some subtle material realms, generally speaking. But this is all subtle energy that is still material. So imagine how fine the soul is. The soul is finer than that.
Transcendental.
It's transcendental. It's actually that. Yeah, that's actually the point. The soul is consciousness, and it is part and parcel of the supreme consciousness. There's that verse, Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam, which means that Krishna and the soul, they have this same qualities. We have a tiny amount of it. So we can go to the next paragraph. Dealing with the sane man.
yeah, I can read. So the same man, however, is enlightened in the disciplic succession from Brahmaji, who was personally instructed by the Lord, or in the disciplic succession from Arjuna, who was personally instructed by the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita. He accepted this statement of the Lord: Aham sarvasya prabhav mata sarvan pravartare iti matava bhajante mam buddha bhava samvita.
Can you click on the verse?
Let him finish the verse, then we'll come back. Okay.
See what the verse says.
Let him finish, then we'll go back.
Prabhuji, did you want me to read or someone else?
Prabhu.
The Lord is the original source of all emanations, and everything that is created, maintained and annihilated exists by the energy of the Lord. The sane man who knows this is actually learned, and therefore he becomes pure devotee of the Lord, engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord.
Gajendra, can you click on 10:8 and we can read? This is one of the most important verses of the Bhagavad Gita. Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravartate iti madhva bhajantima buddha bhava samanvita. I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. It's similar to what we're doing right now. We're talking about the same principles.
Prabhuji, isn't it true that just the way soul is there in every body, super soul is also there in everyone's body?
Yes, yes. The soul and the super soul reside within every living being, and they're described to be like two birds in a tree. One is the active bird, and the other is the witness bird.
Mm-hmm. So when we die, isn't that soul and super soul both go out of the body?
Yes.
And it might be that because super soul is out of the body is dead.
Well, we would say that the soul and the super soul are always together. So they're not, one of them's not going when the other one's staying.
Okay. Okay.
Gajendra, if we can go back to this paragraph, because there's one very important point in the beginning of this paragraph that we need to talk about.
Here in this verse.
In this, the same man, however, is enlightened in the disciplic succession from Brahmaji, who was personally instructed by the Lord, or in the disciplic succession from Arjuna, who was personally instructed by the Lord in Bhagavad Gita.
Okay, this is the beginning of the paragraph we just finished reading, which is paragraph 6 or 7. This is 34.
Yeah.
Yeah, right there.
The sane man.
Is the paragraph that begins with the sane man, however. It's about paragraph 6, maybe 5, 6. We just finished.
I think this is Bhagavad Gita on a screen. Oh no, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Now this is Bhagavatam. Okay?
This is the Bhagavatam now.
Yeah.
So who can tell us about the disciplic succession and why it's important?
And what it is.
And what it is.
Because this is original, right? You hear as is from the original source rather than people creating their own versions of truth.
That's true, because if we don't hear from disciplic succession, we may hear from somebody who is just speculating and making things up. We don't hear anything that's made up. And actually, if we go to the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, it talks all about the disciplic succession. And it actually says here that and in verse 3 of the 4th chapter, he says that Krishna tells Arjuna, that very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told by me to you, because you are my devotee as well as my friend, and therefore can understand. Actually, the verse before is more important. Evam parampara praptam imam rajashayo vidu sagaleneha mahata yoga nashta parantapa. This science, supreme science, was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. That's why Krishna is speaking to Arjuna. If we don't hear from someone the science from this, it's like if you're going to a medical school, you want to make sure that they are following all the proper understandings of the medical profession going back many, many generations. The same way with spiritual science, it has to be understood going back through many, many generations back to Krishna.
We talk about this transcendental knowledge that we are reading about and discussing. It has to be given by the Supreme Lord And then there's a chain of transmission all the way, which is enlightening everybody who connects with this chain of transmission.
And the present time, the chain is represented by Srila Prabhupada. And then he actually has some of his disciples are initiating, just like Sakhi Priya is initiated by Radhanath Maharaj. And he's learning from his guru and passing on to her so that she's getting the same knowledge that he got and the same knowledge that Prabhupada got from his guru. And in this way, everything is coming down unbroken and without being adulterated.
Directly from the Supreme Lord, directly from Krishna.
Does anybody know the story about picking mangoes?
No.
Yes, Mataji shared that other day.
Yes. You want to share it? You heard it?
It is more glorious through her mouth, please. We would love to hear
Okay,
again.
so if there are people picking mangoes and there's a big mango tree, someone goes up to the top and picks the ripe mangoes from the top of the tree. Well, they have to very carefully hand the mango down hand by hand through the tree, because if you take it from the top of a 30-foot tree and toss it to somebody below, when they catch it, it's mush. So in the same way, knowledge cannot simply be, transcendental knowledge cannot simply be handed down without being handed step by step to the generations. And actually,
To qualified individuals.
Yeah, to gurus. So we see here that Gajendra has a graphic here of Lord Krishna and the 4 sampradayas, Lord Brahma's sampradaya, which is called the Madhva sampradaya, and then we have the Ramanuja sampradaya, the Vishnu Swami sampradaya, and the Nimbarkacharya sampradaya. We are part of the Madhva, we're actually called the Madhva Gaudiya sampradaya, Brahma Madhva Gaudiya sampradaya. And the Gaudiya being that particular part of the Madhva Acharya Sampradaya that is coming through Madhavendra Puri, Ishvara Puri, Lord Chaitanya, Mahaprabhu, and then the 6 Goswamis down to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta, and Srila Prabhupada. And we can see the whole there's the whole list right there. And if somebody, invents something like, you've heard maybe of this person, Osho or Rajneesh, he could talk a good game. He made it all up, or he took things that were real and then twisted them in a way in which it became, some sort of strange philosophy. It degraded. So, but this is never degraded because it comes into cyclic succession. That's why we're studying together these books of Srila Prabhupada, which are all based on the 6 Goswamis and the other acharyas. Rudrani and I were reading Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's purport on this verse. You can see Prabhupada's drawing so strongly on these other things, other earlier works. Any other thoughts? Madhvaji?
Thank you.
Okay, the next part.
We can do the next paragraph, and we'll have to just do the first part and then stop because it's getting towards the end. But
it's really long. It's very, very long. But
yeah, we can do the beginning of it.
Deva?
Although the reflectory energy of the Lord displays various illusions to the eyes of the person with a poor fund of knowledge, the same person knows clearly that the Lord can act even from far, far beyond our vision by his different energies, just as fire can diffuse heat and light from a distant place.
Mukesh?
In the medical science of the ancient sages known as the Ayurveda, there is definite acceptance of the Lord's supremacy in the following words. Jagad yonar anichasya chid anarmadika rupinaha Purishosti prakritir nitya pratichareva aham bhasvata Aksentan pi chaitanya yogina paramahatmana akarod vishwam akhilam anityam nata kritam.
Shall we read further, Prabhuji?
I think we can stop there because it's almost 5 of 8. And we can just look at here what's talking about here, that the Lord can act in any way he wants from far, far away. He has different energies. And not sure. Well, if anybody has any questions, I think we can stop here and we'll pick up from this next week, because if we start now, it'll be too much to start with only a few minutes left. Let me ask you a question. Did anybody gain something from today's discussion that they would like to share, something that they can take home that they really think, oh, wow, I just learned something that's really important to me?
Or can apply.
Or can apply in my life. This has really been helpful. Or not, but hopefully helpful.
Always so much to absorb. It's really hard to tell. So
it's good to go over the reading on your own to remember what was discussed. And then that also will open the opportunity for the mind to receive some realizations also.
Yeah, I think one important aspect is that there's a spiritual science. So it is not just an imagination, right? So there's a depth, there's a spiritual science in everything. The names are given, the quantity, the measurements, everything is provided. And I think that's what you look into Srimad Bhagavatam, it's so much depth on every aspect. So that's what you see in this one too, right? With the whole hierarchy and how everything is coming through, what is real and what is not real.
Any other, anybody want to add anything, anything we could unpack or change? I know it's difficult. After this, you're going to think Bhagavad Gita is just a breeze.
Yeah, I used to think like, everyone says like Bhagavad Gita is undergrade and then Srimad Bhagavatam is postgrade. But as you see more and more, it seems to be more like a PhD actually. So it is not just one.
These are particularly dense.
Yeah.
If everybody can just hang in there and grasp what you can, this is really rich, and it's the kind of katha or talks about Krishna that will help. Actually, even if you're not totally conscious of it, build the building blocks of spiritual advancement. It's very cleansing and purifying.
And so also that is something that is very helpful. It's just to read the verses 33, 34, 35, and 36, because what the commentaries are explaining is the verse itself in a way that people can understand what the verses are saying. And because we are reading and discussing, when you read 33 and 34, everything that has been discussed will become really clear. And the same thing with 34, 35 and 36, when we read that, because those are the 4 verses that are the foundation of the whole Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah, I mean, we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, right? And we just completed Canto 1, right? So the first book. And just in first canto, like there's so much depth. And every time we read, there's more and more and more scientific evidence, essentially.
Well, you'll get to this in the second canto soon.
Yeah, we are on the second chapter of the second canto right now, and it's already like it seems like USD,
To give you some idea about the depth of the Srimad Bhagavatam, at the temple we do one verse a day. And we're in the 10th canto. We started the 10th canto at Janmashtami in 2018. We're 23 chapters into the 10th canto. And at this rate, there's 90 chapters. We're going to be on the 10th canto in the temple for another 7 or 8 years.
There is canto 11, and then there's 12. There are 2 more cantos after that.
It is a lifetime of study.
Yeah.
By that measure,
Recently, Radha Gopinath temple, they done the whole Bhagavatam. It took 26 years for them.
And actually,
so we are not bad.
At our rate, it's going to take about that long. You have a child born, and by the time you're done, he's out of medical school.
So we are not that bad actually. In just 4 months, we completed 1 full canto. Yeah, we are like
you're on the speed reader.
Yeah, we are on Tesla's.
But Prabhu, we feel like at least we know what is coming in these all the 12 cantos. So first going just through the translation, it's helpful.
Yeah, I know. We are on the space shuttle of.
We are touching the fundamentals right now. We'll go to the details later. Second time.
Once you finish with the translation reading, and then you will feel like, oh, I want to do it again.
Yeah.
And then you can go with the purport by purport.
Yeah, we don't we do read some part of the purport though. Like whatever is important in the purport, we do read that through.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the way we're doing this actually is not just the Bhagavatam, but it's also association with Srila Prabhupada.
Right.
We're getting his association in his purports. So it's
Yeah.
Bhagavatam plus the pure devotee. So it's really very, very helpful for our spiritual lives.
Absolutely. Yeah.
With that said, I think it's time for something a little lighter.
So we'll have
So good to see everybody.
We have 7-minute kirtan. It's pretty nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hear that? Start our weekend. And this is RadheGovind temple from Jaipur.
Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Radha Ramana Hare Govinda Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hare Govinda Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hare Govinda Jaya Jaya Radha
Haribo, Haribo. That was nice.
So beautiful.
Oh yeah, what fervor.
Yeah.
Fired up, as we would say.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gajendra. You always have these wonderful kirtans, Gajendra.
So
This time.
great. Everyone have a nice weekend.
Okay, everyone have a great weekend.
Hare Krishna.
See you all.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. See you guys next week. Hare
Next
Krishna.
week. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Hare
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Haribol.
Yes, sir.
Over there. Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
See you all. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Welcome here.